Hey there, welcome to the DFS Build NBA edition. I am Kevin Roberts, joined with Taylor Smith, and we're getting together to go over this big 11-game NBA DFS main slate over at DraftKings. The goal, obviously, is to help you win money. It's fun for us to just walk through this process. It helps solidify plays for us and just kind of figure out our strategy. And the goal is to also help you do the same. If this helps you in any way, smash that like button and consider following us by subscribing to the channel. The way we do it on these bigger slates is go position by position, point out the top projection guys that we like and don't like, and then also highlight some values that look really good too. Remember, this is also like very process based. We do hand out our favorite plays, which you can consider NBA DFS picks for the slate, but you do have to adapt and adjust based off of starting lineups, injuries, and projections fluctuating. So keep that all in mind as you put your lineups together. All right, Taylor. So SGA comes in as the top projecting point guard of the slate, which should shock nobody. He has like a 35% usage without Chet Holmgren. And he put up, 70 fantasy points in his last game. That's just what he's capable of, obviously. He comes in with a 53-point fantasy projection and not really much ownership. And a big reason why, obviously, is because Nikola Jokic is out and Jamal Murray is going to be uber chalk. Let's first touch on the spends here. I think we're probably going to agree that 7.1K Jamal Murray is a free square on this slate. We probably just have to play him. At least that's where I'm at. So if you don't think that's true, definitely weigh in on that. But start with SGA, almost 11K. Do you think he is appealing because he's not going to be owned here?
I would think he's appealing even if he is owned. So if he's not owned, then yeah, he's doubly appealing. The usage without Chet is sky high. The matchup against Phoenix is pretty good. They have injuries. We're going to be playing some Suns, I think, on this slate. So it makes sense. Like I was saying, I say somewhat frequently, if you need your Suns' values to reach their ceilings, in theory, they're playing a competitive game. And then you run it back with SGA on the other side at low ownership. I think that makes a lot of sense as a way to build in a tournament. There's enough value on this slate to very easily get him. He's expensive, but the role without Chet is outstanding. The slate has pay-up options, but not like we don't have Jokic anymore. We don't have Giannis on this slate. There's no Luka. So he's kind of I think he's the top guy kind of by default, I guess, along with Wemby and like AD. But I'm hoping the Jamal Murray thing and Russell Westbrook thing lowers his ownership because he's a fantastic play, and I plan to prioritize him regardless.
Yeah, I mean, he has the best projection at the position, and the logic checks out. It does make sense that he would not be owned on the slate because, by the way, I mean, if you just want to look at just best overall values from a high-end perspective, Cade Cunningham at 9.3K comes in with the second best projection of the slate, and he is going to garner ownership, pulling 17% ownership right now because he also went for 70 fantasy points in his last game, and that is the upside that he offers, and he has an amazing matchup against the Raptors. He is too cheap. He's 1.4K cheaper than SGA. That's a big reason why ownership is going to flock there. So it is a little bit tough to take advantage of that when you're looking at that much in savings for a guy that could easily match or exceed SGA on this slate. And his projections like not that far off at all. So I definitely understand the interest in Cade. He looks awesome. His price is probably still not expensive enough. And then you also have guys like Trae Young, a hair under 10K, and James Harden at 9.5K. Those guys are all pushing for or right at 50-point fantasy projections for the slate. And Cade is the only one that is projecting for over 10% ownership. So Trae and Harden look really, really interesting. But the ownership isn't egregious on Cade to the point where we should feel bad about it because he might be a little bit chalky. 9.3K with a 50-point fantasy projection at 17% ownership is very, very interesting. Okay, so what is your plan with those other guys? Cade, Trae, Harden, and let's just throw in Devin Booker in the mix too, just because KD remains out, and you did mention the Suns.
Yeah, I have zero interest in Harden. The matchup's bad. They have good defenders to throw at him. Houston does, so Harden's not on my radar. Cade's kind of my stand against at the moment. I agree it's a phenomenal spot and that he's underpriced and he has triple-double upside. And it feels bad not really playing him, but that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm going a little bit cheaper with a point guard spend that I like who's not going to be popular, it looks like. You have Murray there, you have SGA, you have Russ. there's a lot of quality point guards who are going to go overlooked by default. I think Brandon Ingram is a really good play, especially now with Denver without Jokic. That game could stay closer in theory. You mentioned Booker. I like that a bit. Donovan Mitchell still cheap against Chicago. Great matchup again. Second straight game, I think they're playing each other. So there's just a ton to like, and you can go cheaper. But the expensive-ish guy that I'm kind of flag planting is Halliburton against Miami. He's 8K flat, so it's like min price Halliburton, I think. Miami without Jimmy Butler, not as good defensively. They're like middle of the pack defensively this season. Halliburton's been really hit or miss, so by no means is he a safe play, but I think he's a great play. And then Hero on the other side of that game really stands out at a similar salary.
I mean, I will agree with you all day as far as the price point. Hallie at 8K, in theory, is an amazing value. His home away splits are egregious. He averages 22.8 points per game at home and 12 per game on the road. I know that's
you're at home then.
I know. I'm just saying I know it's a little noisy, but that's really crazy. I'm not going to be on board with it just because obviously Jamal Murray is $900 cheaper and there's so many good studs who project better above him, but I understand it. Just worth noting, he has had 31 or fewer fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games, but he's
really hit or miss.
I know. Yeah. I mean, he had 65 fantasy points 2 games ago. Yeah. If he's not going to be owned, he is interesting for sure. Another guy I like is Jalen Brunson, especially if Cat is out. Obviously, Cat being out you're shaking your head.
Brunson, like at full strength, he just hasn't been the same. Like they're not running the offense through him. It's
if Cat's out, that might change.
Cat's out, yeah. But if Cat's in, I'm not really playing Brunson.
Yeah. No, I don't really want, of course, Cat screwed me on Wednesday when he just careered for 46 points and like 70 fantasy points. But honestly, I don't want the Knicks that much on a big slate when they're at full strength. I mean, they obviously play like 40 minutes, so they all kind of have built-in floors, but the ceilings just really aren't going to consistently be there, or really what it is just guessing which one is going to go off that day. So in theory, Brunson of 8.6K is fine, but if Cat is out, I really like him. Darius Garland is popping as he should against the Bulls. He looks good at 7.1K. Jordan Poole against the Hawks.
Same price as Murray. I don't think anyone's going to play Garland anymore, right?
I don't know.
I mean, you can't play everyone. I think Murray is the exact same price. He's going to be significantly more owned than Garland, I would think.
Well, I mean, the matchup and the price and projection are all really good for Garland. So I think the guy that's not going to be owned is going to be Donovan Mitchell because he's 1,000 more.
I don't think either of them will be. You can play Mitchell at shooting guard also, which kind of helps his
roster. Okay. All I'm saying is Garland isn't very expensive. He's $1,000 cheaper than Mitchell. So by default, he's just probably going to get a little bit more ownership. And he is pulling 14% ownership right now as we speak. So honestly, this is all cool, but this just makes me want to go get one of the top stud, more expensive point guards even more because they're just going to be overlooked. And going and getting a guy with just a maximum ceiling is never a bad idea. Did you say what you were going to do with Devin Booker tonight with KD out?
I like him. It's just hard to get there. Like this is a 10-game slate, and there's a lot of injury news, and he's been priced up with Beal and KD out. Like I think he's a phenomenal play. The matchup's horrible though against Oklahoma City, so. Take that for what it's worth. I think the cheaper Phoenix guys are easier to justify. You can always play Booker. Like I think he can be a pretty unique and pretty interesting difference maker on this slate, but really hard to prioritize him at a guard spot today.
100% agree. Don't really like the price given the projection and matchup. OKC is not a fun draw, but he's not going to be owned at all. So that is kind of interesting. Booker to end the night, maybe across from SGA. That could be fun. Working our way down, Russell Westbrook obviously should benefit greatly from Aaron Gordon or Jokic. He's only 5.2K. His price is coming down, so that's pretty nice. He looks like a solid value. He's going to be monster chalk. So, I mean, you certainly could go away from Russ because Jamal is in there. And we know all the other guys are going to play. Peyton Watson, Christian Brown. We know they're going to play. So is it possible he doesn't get a super expanded role and or just isn't as efficient as we would want him to be? Yeah, it's not impossible. I'm probably playing him at 5.2, but the fact that he's almost 44% owned is worrisome.
One way to do it might be to just set a rule where you don't play he and Murray in the same lineup, because both are great plays. I think people are going to jam them both together a lot, which locks you into a point guard in one spot and a guard in the other. They're not for sure going to go off at the same time. Russ is probably still coming off the bench. I think he's going to get minutes because this game against New Orleans, who has no bigs to begin with, in theory, it's pretty easy to see that going small. Like Zeke Naji might be a fake starter who plays 15 minutes or 12 minutes or something like that. So Russ has a role. I just don't think he's like an auto smash. And I think the field might treat him like he is an auto smash.
I know that's where the ownership is going. When I was looking at it, I did not really feel like he was an auto smash. I like the price and I like the added minutes, probably. Like, we don't know for sure. And he can do a lot when he's out there, and the matchup was good.
It's a kind of a scary fade, but even when Murray was out and Russ was starting, which we're not expecting him to do tonight, he wasn't like closing games. He was still playing like 30 minutes, but it was all in the first 3 quarters, and they would close with like Strawther or somebody else. And I don't think that'll change tonight. Like, his minutes floor is definitely lower than the projection might say. Mm-hmm. And the fact that he may not close a close game makes me a little nervous about him.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, 44% owned. There's definitely logic to go against it. Right now, I'm probably playing him, but I'm going to look for reasons to not, especially if the ownership stays where it is. One guy that kind of allows you to do that, and his ownership is down probably because of this news, Chris Dunn at 4.4K. He got the start last game for the Clippers. His projection is not amazing, but he does project for 30 minutes. I think he's a pretty darn good value still. I think the fact that all these other things are happening and perhaps more news comes in is going to take even more ownership away from him, and he's going to be overlooked. But at that price, I dig it. I think he's still a good value.
I think the pivot away from Russ would be McCain in the same range, 5,500, shooting guard, point guard eligible. George and Embiid are back, but Maxi's still out. I think McCain's going to have a big role either way. He's not going to score 50 fantasy points like he did the other night when none of them were in, but it's not a really dissimilar situation to the one that Russ is playing. And McCain is essentially the same price. Not going to be owned at all. They're playing Orlando, so it's a bad matchup. They have a low total. But if you're looking for a semi-straight line pivot from Russ, you have him and you have Davion Mitchell, who should start again with Quickly out. That Toronto-Detroit game looks pretty interesting too. Should stay close. Point guard is so stacked that you definitely don't have to play a 50% owned Russell Westbrook tonight. I think you can get different pretty easily with some of these other guys too in the same range. Even Rozier for 6-1, like more expensive, but good matchup.
Rozier, man.
LeVert, another one.
Dude, Rozier hooked like a really good lineup I had on FanDuel the last time I used them. And of course, Hero got 40 real points in that game. So going Rozier over Hero just totally boned me. So that's recency bias in a nutshell for you right there. But whatever. Rozier pisses me off. Yeah, Rozier is the guy. He's the kind of guy that, like, if it's Rozier chalk and I fade, he goes for like 40 real points or something. It's always what happens. If I play him, he shoots 1 for 14. So, okay, the point is here, lots to consider at point guard. I think the chalk on paper looks good. Like, there's nothing wrong with Jamal and Russ. But I am very, very interested in getting a little bit different there, and especially in a really expensive SGA, since, like you said, like, he's kind of the stud on this slate, and he's not even owned. All right, let's move it along here, though. Shooting guard, a lot of the same guys roll over to shooting guard, so we're not going to double down on any of the guys we already talked about. There is Tyler Hero with a 40-point fantasy projection at 7.8K. Kind of still too cheap with Jimmy Butler out. Don't know if I'm going to pay for him here, but he looks like a fine tournament play at just about 10% ownership. If you think that Cavs game stays close, come along on the other side away from Donovan and Garland would be Zach LaVine at 6.8. He's an okay tourney play. Brandon Ingram, like you said, looks really, really good. He's a top projecting shooting guard on the slate. Devin Booker is right behind him. If you don't play Jamal Murray at point guard, shooting guard is a good spot for him as well. So it's really a lot of the same guys. Is there anybody else that we haven't talked about that is on your radar?
We haven't really talked about Ingram that much, but he's a good run back. We didn't talk about Jalen Noel at point guard, but he's only 4K still. They're still without all the same guys they were without the other night. He did not exactly smash, but he did get mid-20s minutes off the bench. He
Yeah, he
gets
did not
usage.
smash. I can assure you.
That's what I said.
I can assure you, I lived through the pain of 26 minutes of Jalen Noel. He did
Yeah, I
not.
mean, he's still a fine play. I think people are going to be afraid to go back to it. I don't see a huge problem with it as a lower owned value on this slate as well. But Grayson Allen, I guess, would be one we haven't talked about. He's questionable, but if he's in, should
Oh,
see
he looks
20
great.
plus 25 to 30 minutes off the bench in theory for Phoenix. He's only 3.7, guard forward eligible. I think he's a guy you can put into your lineup and kind of wait on news and see if anything breaks after lock. And if not, you just have Grayson Allen if he's in
Well, if
as a
he's out,
very
just
strong
pivot to
value.
Josh Okogie if you have him at small forward, especially.
You can play both of them. I mean, Okogie should see minutes as well, given their
Right.
situation. You have Julian Straw there for Denver, another punt piece you can consider since they're down 2 starters also. There's a lot of punt stuff. Isaiah Joe, Malik Beasley, if Jaden Ivey's out, he's 5'2", so don't love that, but minutes should be through the roof if Ivey's out again. I don't really think he will be, but it's worth monitoring. And then, yeah, like we haven't really talked about anyone else. I guess Matherin for 6'2" is fine, but not dying to do that.
I mean, in my opinion, this is a pay down spot. I have no problem with Ingram or Booker, and obviously I'm playing Jamal, so I'll probably just play Jamal right away at point guard to start. And then if I'm going at shooting guard, I mean, Ingram, Booker, Donovan Mitchell, those guys are all fine. It just feels like there's a lot of value here that we can just go and exploit it right away. Another one that we could look at is Christian Brown at 5.3K. He's obviously got a really good role for Denver. He's been playing extremely well. I will note, though, I read this really good breakdown by one of the ESPN NBA writers, and they were just kind of highlighting what kind of game he's had on the year, which has been, not really creating his own shot, benefiting greatly from Jokic's passing and getting it set up. So I will warn people that I don't know for sure if Christian Brown's, playing style is really beneficial for, getting like extra volume and like more minutes without these other guys there. Cause that not having really good players sometimes actually hurts you greatly. So I like the price. I like the role. And the matchup is good, but I do think there is some concern there that no Jokic actually might hurt him. The other guy, Grady Dick at 6.3K. I mean, he just keeps scoring. So Grady Dick is fine. Nobody's going to be on him at all. The Pistons are a good matchup. And then Brandon Boston at 6.4K. Major role. The Pels are all dead. And obviously, if you're going to be playing Denver Nuggets, guys, it's not the worst idea to have a run back. And if you don't want to pay almost 9K for Brandon Ingram, Boston at 6.4. I mean, he's too cheap for the role he has currently. Like, he's playing monster minutes and getting all kinds of shots up. So he's still a guy. His projection sucks, but I mean, I think that's too low. I think he has a pretty good shot at 40 fantasy points here.
Yeah, I will not be playing him just because it's a full slate and he's max price. I think there are other ways to go. Like Matherin is more of a guy I would consider in that range with Nembhard and Neesmith out, for example.
Yeah, is he starting?
Yep.
Okay. He's been playing really well, actually, too, Matherin. Wow. So he's coming in at he's pretty chalky, almost 24%, but that looks like pretty decent chalk. Not gonna lie. But hey, Boston is a pivot away from that chalk at basically the same price if you want to consider that. And so is Dick. I think they're both pretty interesting tournament pivots for sure. Because hey, let's be honest, as good as it looks for Matherin, he's not a guy that does a whole lot beyond score. So if he's not going to hit his shots and go off tonight offensively, he could fail pretty easily. All right. Anybody else to note for shooting guard?
No.
All right, so over at small forward, LeBron James leads the way with a 48-point fantasy projection. He is not going to be owned at all, but he is 10.2K, so I'm personally not feeling that. I would rather just pay down with Franz Wagner, who's projected for 42 fantasy points and also no ownership. Also worth mentioning are RJ Barrett at 8.1K with no Emmanuel Quickly. He's carrying a little bit of ownership, but he looks really good at that price. And Paul George at 8.3K. He smashed the other day when I was digging tournament. Paul George, 57 fantasy points. Because, if he's going to play 35 minutes already, I mean, that doesn't feel too restricted for what he can do. His projection's just okay. And the matchup with Orlando is not really something I want to target. So again, not sure I'm going to go all the way up at small forward, especially with Mathurin and Michael Porter Jr. Sitting right there. But if I had to, I think I would just eat the RJ Barrett chalk. He feels a little bit too cheap with no quickly.
Yeah, I'm not super on Barrett. I'm not on Paul George at all. Once again, I do think Wagner's a fine play. I think Michael Porter is like a smash at 6'5", just a very easy play. No Gordon and Jokic, so like the usage has to go somewhere. Murray will get a lot of it. Porter's really the only high usage guy other than Russ that can take some from Murray. So good play, underpriced, good matchup. The Pelicans, not a good defense. They have no one left. NBA guy at least, except Ingram. So love that. I think LeBron is a pretty interesting spend up. 10-2. He's been balling once again. The Spurs are not a very good defensive team. I don't think LeBron's going to be very owned on this slate. I think people are going to be paying their money elsewhere. So LeBron as a pay up to be different guy looks good to me. Levine is okay. Cam Thomas, kind of the similar play, is okay as a usage guy. Otherwise, it's a lot of the same. Grayson Allen, Strother, Lou Dort, I don't know if we mentioned Mathurin. Trey Murphy's okay, but not a great position, honestly.
No, it's probably just I'm probably gonna start it off with MPJ there. It's either gonna be MPJ at 6.5K or it's gonna be Grayson Allen, and then I'll pivot to Okogie if Allen or Strother if Allen ends up not playing. But yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with LeBron. He has been awesome lately. 76 fantasy points in his last game, 60 plus in 3 straight. So he's been really, really good. It's just he is priced up a bit at this point, and he does not project as well as some of the other guys who are, pretty appealing studs. Switch over to small or power forward. LeBron is obviously over there as well. He leads the way at power forward too. Jalen Johnson is second with 45 fantasy points. Franz Wagner is third with 42 fantasy points in terms of projection. And a lot of the same guys we talked about as small forward carry on over here. None of these guys are going to be owned. RJ Barrett is the chalky play. And then Peyton Watson at 4.6K is mega chalk. I don't have a problem with, honestly, how many Nuggets are too many Nuggets on this slate? I feel really good about Denver. I like Peyton Watson a lot too at 4.6K. He should play quite a bit. Like you said, they could go small, both sides of that game. I guess Josh Hart is an okay price at 6.9. Don't know if he's going to be a big priority. I know he's not going to be owned. Yeah, what else are you seeing here at power forward?
Yeah, the Nuggets are the obvious ones. They look great. Siakam, I don't hate, I guess, against Miami at 74. Feels a little bit cheap for him.
Good tourney play for sure.
Yeah. Mobley's questionable. If he's out, I guess that clears like Jared Allen at center for a little bit more, but I guess we'll get to that when we get to it. Jalen Johnson is a spend. I don't mind. We haven't talked about Atlanta. They have a 125-point team total against the worst defense in the NBA. The Wizards get smashed by bigs. Johnson's not like big, but he's a power forward. So expensive, but I don't think that's a bad tournament option on this slate. Patrick Williams is okay, I guess. Tobias Harris in the mid-range is fine against Toronto. I kind of like Chris Boucher as a punt who's not going to be owned on this slate. The minutes for him with his injuries quickly being out, for example, he's played like 20-ish to 24 minutes in recent games. Great per minute guy. Detroit, not a good team, not a good defensive team particularly. So don't mind Boucher as kind of a random like one-off tournament pivot.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm kind of just looking at like where is there a similar projection and a just massive price gap. And I think power forward is definitely one of those spots. LeBron James is 1.3K more than Jalen Johnson, and Jalen Johnson is only 3 points away from him in terms of projection. And he's also like, he's coming at 7% ownership, but on this slate, that means nothing. He's just not going to be owned. Him and Franz Wagner stand out quite a bit as guys who are kind of priced where they should be at this point, but they offer better ceilings than their projection suggests. Like they both look really, really good. And like you said, Wizards is like kind of the best matchup on the board beyond Chicago. So yeah, I like that. I like Jalen Johnson quite a bit too. What was their other value play? You said Okogie is also eligible at power forward. He's power forward only, actually. Okay. So I might have to slide Grayson away from small forward to forward if I'm going to do that pivot. All right, let's kick it over to center to wrap things up. Anthony Davis leads the way with a 53-point fantasy projection. Not very owned. He's under 10% owned right now. Wemby is $600 more. And coming in with a 50-point fantasy projection, 3 below Anthony Davis. He is not projecting to be owned at all. I do wonder if that kind of fluctuates as we get closer to lock, just because Jokic is out now, and it's just maybe it's like slow to respond. But if Wemby is going to be unowned, that's very interesting to me. I mean, I would be much more interested in unowned Wemby than SGA, just because I think he does have a higher ceiling. Lot to like at center, honestly. Cat, I don't know if he's going to get 70 fantasy points again, but the Nets are a good matchup. He's projecting for almost 50. Do have to keep an eye on his status. He's questionable. Bam is chalky, almost 30% owned, pushing a 50-point fantasy projection and a pretty good spot against the Pacers. I played Bam last time when he was kind of chalky. Well, I mean, he was projected to be chalky, but he only came in at like 13% ownership, and he had 43 fantasy points, which was a little bit disappointing at the time. So what do you think about Bam, and which of these studs do you want to pay up for?
Bam's fine. The matchup's good against Indiana. I don't have any issue with that. It's just there's a lot to like at center, like there always is. I think Towns is the best play on the slate if he's in. Like Brooklyn is without Claxton, Watford, Sharp, and Bogdanovich. Like they have no bigs left. In theory, Towns should completely murder them if he plays. I think Noah Clowney might be the center, or Ben Simmons might be the center. So no size on Brooklyn, essentially. He's going to face very little resistance. I guess there's some blowout risk, but I'm not concerned about it. I think Towns is very easily the best play on the slate if he plays. Bam's okay. AD's okay. Wemby's fine. Kind of like Pirtle in the mid-range without quickly. The minutes tend to be up for him. Good matchup against Detroit. On the other side of that one, Duren is 5'9". The Raptors 26th in points in the paint allowed per game, 29th in defensive rating. Only the Wizards are worse defensively than the Raptors. Duren's underpriced for who he is. I think he's a very strong mid-range value who I don't think is going to be super popular. I mentioned Boucher. I think Capella is an interesting tournament play too. 5-1 against the Wizards. Alex Sarr might be the worst big man in the league. So bigs against the Wizards will be a thing all season. Joe Val on the other side of that game, I think is okay as a pivot. Nurkic, if he plays, looks somewhat interesting against the worst rebounding team in the NBA. There's a lot to like. Miles Turner's fine. It's pretty stacked as always.
Yeah, the thing with Duren, he's cheap because his minutes are all over the place because he gets in foul trouble so much. He did play 36 minutes in his last game despite committing 5 fouls. And we know he has a reasonable ceiling. He's always a double-double threat. So as far as a price point play goes, I'm with you. I'm with you. The matchup looks really good too. So I have no problem with that. I think the only thing I would note for center is that if Bam is going to be 30% owned, not that I don't like Bam, not that I wouldn't want to play him, but Jalen Williams looks really, really good. He's almost the same price and coming in at half the ownership. So I think that is an amazing pivot. I wouldn't ignore Şengün either. Again, same exact price. The projection is a little bit lower than Jalen Williams, but once again, Şengün is going to be completely unowned. So I do have interest in him if he's going to be only 5% owned. But obviously, we have to pay up to some degree at center because we have 2 dudes with over a 50-point fantasy projection and 2 more with almost a 50-point fantasy projection. So odds are pretty good. 1 or 2 of those guys are going to hit, whether they only hit their projection or they far exceed it. So I definitely want to pay up, possibly twice. We'll see how it goes. All right, so let's wrap it up here with our number 1 flag play and overall strategy for the slate. What are you doing for tonight?
Yeah, I think I'm going to not play Murray and Russ together. I'm going to be pretty well under on Russ, I think, just because point guard has so much to like. And I don't really think the ownership should congregate the way it likely will around him. I think Murray's a more stable play because you can play him at shooting guard for one thing. But Russ is kind of the guy I'm going to be going against, I think. And then I'll just be pivoting to others in that range.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a 2 or 3, like a 2v2, 3v3 night. I think I'm going to eat a lot of the chalk, and most of it coming from Denver and Phoenix. Those are the guys that will gladly play. Don't have a problem with that at all, because I mean the most expensive option in that group is 7.1K, so you can get to all those guys pretty comfortably and then just make a couple different moves, and that's just going to come down to ownership for me, and probably is going to have me fading Bam, which is a little bit scary, but I think pivoting from him to Şengün or Jalen just gets you different, and you have a pretty similar floor ceiling that you're looking at, and then just go get. I'm going to probably do a one stud build on this slate and go get the one that isn't owned and has the most upside. Right now, I'm leaning Wemby. I think if Wemby has a chance of being 2% owned or something, I mean, obviously, usually like doubles or triples by the time we get to lock. But if he's going to be under 10% owned, Wemby is really interesting on this slate. All right, that is going to do it for us. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully, this helped you out a little bit. If it did, smash that like button. Let's see if we can get it to 20 likes. And also subscribe to the channel so you can get alerted to more videos just like this. Thanks for watching, and good luck.